Hello everyone, welcome to Earth Archives. We all know that there were defections on both the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War, but the defection of a pilot not only caused a major incident, but also allowed the United States to uncover Soviet military secrets. Today, let's talk about this story of defection that influenced history. Please subscribe to the show before it starts, and share it with your friends if possible. The Cold War was a period defined by tension, espionage, and the constant jockeying for military and ideological supremacy between the United States and the Soviet Union. On one front, both superpowers poured resources into advancing military technologies, seeking the upper hand with increasingly sophisticated weapons. On another, they forged alliances, forming blocs that would stand in opposition to one another for decades. In this environment of mistrust and rivalry, there were bound to be betrayals, and one of the most audacious occurred on a fateful day in 1976, when a Soviet pilot, Viktor Belenko, defected with a highly classified MiG-25P Foxbat, shocking both the Western world and the Soviet Union. Born in 1947 in the city of Nalchik in the Soviet Union's North Caucasus, Viktor Belenko grew up in a working-class family. His father, a miner, had fought in the Great Patriotic War, the Eastern Front of World War II. Belenko initially studied medicine at university but soon switched paths, driven by a passion for aviation. This passion led him to enroll in the Soviet Air Force's aviation school in the Krasnodar region. After graduating in 1970, he trained as a pilot on the MiG-17, a Soviet jet fighter. By 1973, Belenko's career seemed secure. He married Ludmila, and soon they had a son, Dmitry. His life appeared stable. However, this stability was an illusion. In 1974, he was transferred to the elite 513th Fighter Regiment of the Soviet Air Defense Forces, stationed in Chugovka, a remote part of the Soviet Far East. There, Belenko was assigned to fly the MiG-25P, a cutting-edge fighter jet that had the potential to outpace virtually any adversary, and was considered one of the most advanced aircraft in the world at the time. But beneath this success, Belenko's personal life began to unravel. Faced with career disappointments and a faltering marriage, he grew disillusioned with the Soviet system and, by 1976, the idea of defection began to take root in his mind. Belenko's defection would not be easy. The nearest Western country, Japan, was 700 kilometers away, right at the limit of the MiG-25P's range. Even if he managed to evade Soviet air defenses, he would have to contend with Japan's airspace and its own interception systems. Nevertheless, Belenko resolved to make the attempt. On the morning of September 6, 1976, at 12:50 p.m., he took off from Chugovka Air Base in the MiG-25P, code-named Red 31, as part of a routine 5-plane training sortie. The aircraft, fresh from the factory in February of that year, was part of a training squadron where all planes were unarmed. Moments later, as the squadron ascended to 5,800 meters, Belenko suddenly dived and disappeared into the clouds. His fellow pilots assumed he had lost control and were deeply concerned, but they had no way of knowing what was truly happening. Belenko's MiG-25 vanished from Soviet radar, and communication with him was lost. His comrades landed, believing Belenko had crashed into the sea. But in reality, after breaking contact with his squadron, Belenko descended to just 30 meters above the ground, flying as low as possible to avoid detection. He turned off his radar and communications and flew directly toward Japan, heading for Chitose Air Base, which was his intended destination. To avoid Soviet radar, Belenko kept his flight altitude mostly below 60 meters, despite the fact that low-altitude flying consumed more fuel. After flying for more than an hour, Belenko crossed the Sea of Japan and approached the Japanese coast. As he neared Hokkaido, his fuel gauges began flashing red. Realizing that he wouldn't make it to Chitose, he altered course toward the closer Hakodate airport. As he made his first approach, he saw a Boeing 727 taking off, forcing him to abandon his landing attempt. On his second approach, however, he touched down successfully, though the MiG-25 was too large for the short civilian runway. Even with the deployment of his drag chute, Belenko's aircraft skidded off the runway, coming to a stop only after tearing through 60 meters of grass, and its landing gear exploded. As curious bystanders cautiously approached the exotic aircraft, Belenko opened the cockpit and, speaking in Russian, ordered them to leave. When they didn't understand, he fired 2 shots into the air, using his pistol to clear the crowd. It was only then that the full gravity of the situation dawned on the Japanese. This Soviet pilot was not lost or disoriented, he had defected deliberately. The Japanese authorities quickly detained Belenko, taking him to Sapporo for interrogation. After an initial round of questioning, he requested political asylum in the United States. Belenko was then flown by police helicopter to Chitose Air Base, the very place he had originally intended to reach. From there, he was transferred to a military transport plane and sent to a U.S. airbase near Tokyo for further interrogation. The dramatic moment came when an airport official, waving a white flag, cautiously approached the MiG-25. Belenko handed him a note written in Russian, which read, "Contact the U.S. intelligence representatives immediately." This was the beginning of a long process that would see Belenko given asylum in the United States, where he would eventually reveal details about the MiG-25, which had been one of the Soviet Union's most secretive and advanced weapons. His defection was a huge blow to Soviet prestige, and the West celebrated it as a monumental intelligence victory. For the Soviet Union, the defection was a catastrophic embarrassment. It exposed serious flaws in the system of military oversight and the vulnerability of even its most secretive technology. For Belenko, it marked the end of one life and the beginning of another, as he was embraced by the West as a hero, the man who had single-handedly broken through the Iron Curtain with one of the Soviet Union's most prized assets. But the MiG-25, the aircraft that had carried him to freedom, would forever remain a symbol of both the incredible risks he took and the shocking betrayal he committed. The dramatic defection of Viktor Belenko, a Soviet pilot who fled to Japan with a MiG-25, is one of the Cold War's most shocking and consequential events, involving not only the Soviet Union and the United States but also Japan. The MiG-25, a supersonic interceptor jet, was considered the Soviet Union's crown jewel in military aviation, and Belenko's escape with this prized aircraft sent shockwaves through the geopolitical landscape of the time. In the 1970s, the MiG-25, with its extraordinary speed and altitude capabilities, was unrivaled. Powered by 2 massive Tumansky R-15 turbojet engines, it could reach speeds of 2,190 miles per hour, 3,493 kilometers per hour, flying at altitudes as high as 85,000 feet, 25,900 meters. It was a machine that surpassed most Western aircraft in performance, with only the State Route 71 Blackbird posing a challenge. The MiG-25 made its public debut at the 1967 Moscow Air Show, where NATO quickly assigned it the codename Foxbat. The West was captivated, and military experts feared its potential. In 1971, a squadron of MiG-25s was sent to Egypt, where Soviet pilots used the jets for reconnaissance missions over the Sinai Peninsula. During these missions, the MiG-25 easily evaded repeated interceptions by Israeli F-4 Phantom fighters, cementing its reputation as a formidable adversary. The Western world, particularly the United States, had long desired to acquire a MiG-25 to study its advanced technology. However, despite numerous attempts, they were unable to obtain one. This desire for intelligence on the MiG-25 only intensified with each new report of its superior capabilities. Unbeknownst to them, a disillusioned Soviet pilot was about to deliver this elusive treasure directly to their doorstep. On September 6, 1976, Viktor Belenko, a Soviet pilot stationed in the Soviet Far East, made the fateful decision to defect with a MiG-25. His personal life had been in turmoil, and he had grown increasingly disillusioned with the Soviet regime. He took off from his base in Chugovka, flying as part of a routine training flight. But within minutes, Belenko veered off course, diving the MiG-25 into a steep descent before disappearing from radar. Soviet officials and his fellow pilots initially assumed he had crashed or lost control. However, Belenko had merely broken contact with his squadron and began a daring low-altitude flight toward Japan. Flying at altitudes below 60 meters to avoid detection by Soviet radar, Belenko crossed the Sea of Japan and neared the Japanese island of Hokkaido. As Belenko approached Japan's airspace, Japanese radar picked up the MiG-25. Despite sending out warnings and scrambling F-4 Phantom interceptors, Japan's Air Force was unable to catch up with the lightning-fast MiG. After flying for over an hour, Belenko's fuel ran low, and he diverted to the nearest airport, Hakodate Airport on Hokkaido. There, he made a series of attempts to land, finally touching down after a dramatic and risky approach. The MiG-25, too large for the airport's short runway, skidded off the end, but Belenko managed to bring it to a stop, causing only minor damage to the aircraft. At the airport, Belenko opened the cockpit and, in broken Russian, ordered the crowd that had gathered to move back. When they didn't understand, he fired 2 warning shots into the air. It was then that the Japanese realized they were not dealing with a lost or malfunctioning aircraft, but rather a defector with a very specific and calculated intent. Belenko was quickly detained by Japanese authorities and transported to Sapporo for questioning. Back in Moscow, the Soviet government went into damage control mode. They initially claimed that Belenko had become disoriented during a routine training flight and had been forced to land in Japan due to low fuel. However, Japan was under significant pressure from both the Soviet Union and the United States. The Soviet ambassador demanded access to Belenko, while the U.S. government urged Japan to allow him to question the defector. As tensions mounted, the Japanese government hesitated, eventually agreeing to allow a Soviet diplomat to meet with Belenko. This meeting, which lasted only 7 minutes, was tense and unproductive. The Soviet official, a KGB agent, angrily denounced Belenko as a traitor, but Belenko remained resolute in his decision to remain in Japan and seek asylum in the United States. On September 13, 1976, U.S. President Gerald Ford confirmed that Belenko would be granted political asylum in the United States, marking a major victory in the Cold War propaganda battle. The announcement sent shockwaves through Moscow, which was furious at Japan for harboring the defector. The Soviet government issued a statement condemning Japan's actions, accusing him of violating international law and damaging relations between the two nations. To try and salvage some face, the Soviet Union played the emotional card, sending Belenko's mother and wife, Lyudmila, to publicly appeal for his return. But Belenko remained steadfast in his decision. Meanwhile, the U.S. intelligence agencies, eager to extract valuable information from the defector, began their interrogation of Belenko. Over the next few months, he provided a wealth of details about Soviet military operations, including the morale of Soviet airmen and the development of an advanced version of the MiG-25, what would later become the MiG-31, known to NATO as the Foxhound. The United States was quick to examine the MiG-25, which was transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio for a thorough evaluation. This invaluable piece of Soviet military hardware, now in American hands, was carefully scrutinized by U.S. military experts. Japanese officials, admitting their inability to fully understand the aircraft, cooperated by allowing U.S. experts to inspect it. The MiG-25, still a technological marvel, was found to be an exceptional high-altitude interceptor. Despite its impressive speed and rugged build, its avionics were outdated compared to the U.S. Air Force's latest F-15 Eagle. The MiG-25's radar and targeting systems, along with its IFF, identification friend or foe, system, were especially noteworthy for their simplicity and reliability. 2 months after Belenko's defection, Japan bowed to pressure and agreed to return the MiG-25 to the Soviet Union. The aircraft was disassembled and shipped in 30 crates to Hitachi port, where it was loaded onto a Soviet freighter. When it arrived in Vladivostok, Soviet authorities quickly noticed that many parts of the MiG had been repainted and re-welded. The US had left its mark on the aircraft, and many components still had English-language labels, revealing the extent to which the Americans had studied it. The Soviet Union's anger at Belenko's defection was palpable, and the pilot was tried in absentia for treason and sentenced to death. The KGB even spread rumors that he had accidentally died while in the United States, but the truth remained that Belenko's defection had caused a significant loss for the Soviet military. The MiG-25 was one of their most advanced machines, and with Belenko's flight, they not only lost an aircraft but also valuable intelligence that would shape the future of aviation technology on both sides of the Iron Curtain. After his defection, Viktor Belenko's life in the United States unfolded in an unexpected yet significant manner, marking a new chapter in the life of a man who had once been a part of one of the Soviet Union's most elite military units. Belenko settled in the U.S., where he became an aerospace consultant in 1980, the same year he was granted U.S. citizenship. He would later publish an autobiography titled MiG Pilot, which recounted in vivid detail the story of his defection and the tumultuous events that followed. His book provided an insider's view of the Soviet military system and the high-stakes political drama surrounding his flight to freedom. In the U.S., Belenko started to rebuild his life, beginning a new family with a music teacher from North Dakota. They had 2 sons together, but, like his first marriage, this one eventually fell apart. Nevertheless, Belenko moved forward with his new life in America, which was now a mix of professional accomplishments and personal challenges. In 1996, following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Belenko returned to Russia, a trip filled with complex emotions. He visited his homeland, but his return was not one of homecoming. It was rather a reflection of the turbulent personal and political journey he had endured. The visit, underlined by his time spent in America, was a strange and somber reminder of the path he had chosen decades earlier. For the Japanese, the defection of Belenko, piloting the MiG-25, a fighter jet shrouded in mystery, was an intelligence windfall. The moment Belenko landed at Hakodate Airport, the airport quickly became a hotbed of covert activities. The CIA, practically euphoric, could hardly believe their good fortune in obtaining such a rare opportunity to examine the MiG. The aircraft was swiftly transferred to a nearby base for further inspection. Roger Connor, the director of the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, remarked that, in his view, the Soviet Union had not built the superfighter that the Pentagon feared. Instead, the MiG-25 was designed for specific high-altitude interception missions, but it was far from a versatile or agile fighter. Its turbojet engines, though powerful, used air intake to combust fuel and generate thrust, making it a jet specifically engineered for high-speed, high-altitude performance rather than low-level agility or dogfighting. The MiG-25's design prompted the United States to embark on a new aircraft development project. This, in turn, led to the creation of the F-15 Eagle, a fighter designed to match the MiG's speed and altitude capabilities while offering greater flexibility. Even 40 years after its introduction, the F-15 remains in active service today, a testament to the lasting impact of Belenko's defection on U.S. military aviation. While the MiG-25 was eventually returned to the Soviet Union after being thoroughly examined and disassembled by American experts, it was clear that the Soviet Union had suffered a considerable loss. The plane was packed into 30 crates and shipped back to the USSR, with Japan billing the Soviet government for $40,000 to cover shipping and the damage caused by Belenko's landing at Hakodate. The MiG-25, designed to intercept high-speed U.S. reconnaissance aircraft like the State Route 71 Blackbird, proved unable to even catch up with its intended target. The Soviet Union's loss didn't end with the defection itself. Belenko's escape and the subsequent intelligence gathering by the U.S. provided invaluable insight into Soviet defense technology. The U.S. obtained not just the MiG-25's blueprints and intelligence about its radar and targeting systems, but also information about the Soviets' IFF, identification friend or foe, system and their methods of countering Western aircraft. The U.S. military was able to adjust and adapt their own systems to counteract Soviet advances, helping them stay ahead in the ongoing Cold War rivalry. Despite these setbacks, the Soviet Union continued to produce MiG-25s, eventually building over 1,200 of the planes. The MiG-25 would go on to serve as a key part of Soviet air defense for many years, touted as the second fastest aircraft in the world after the State Route 71. Nations like Algeria and Syria continued to use the MiG-25 well into the late 20th century, and even India operated MiG-25 reconnaissance aircraft until 2006, when they were finally retired due to a lack of spare parts. As for Belenko, he did not return to Russia with the partially disassembled MiG. Instead, he had been granted a new life in America, with his defection sanctioned by President Jimmy Carter himself. In the U.S., Belenko became an aerospace engineer and worked as a consultant for the U.S. Air Force, a sharp contrast to his former life as a Soviet military pilot. The MiG-25 story did not end with Belenko's defection, though. Its design influenced the creation of the MiG-31, a more advanced variant with better engines, radar, and sensors. The MiG-31 was regarded as the completion of the MiG-25's original concept, a truly formidable interceptor capable of carrying out the tasks the MiG-25 had been designed for. It entered service in the late 1980s, during the final years of the Cold War, and is still in operation today in Russia, patrolling the vastness of the country's airspace. The MiG-31 remains a highly classified aircraft, with its internal design and capabilities closely guarded, and Western observers still encounter its sleek silhouette at airshows, though its inner workings are still shrouded in mystery. Though there have been no more defections of MiG-31 pilots, the story of Belenko and the MiG-25 remains a powerful reminder of the lengths to which Cold War tensions drove both individuals and nations. For Belenko, his act of defection became more than just a personal choice. It became a pivotal moment in the Cold War, altering the course of aviation history and contributing to the complex web of intelligence, military power, and political maneuvering between the superpowers.